Okay. Welcome everybody. It's 1 o'clock. It's Tuesday. Time for another HDF clinic. Unless I'm mistaken in counting, it's our 50th HDF clinic. And who knew that we would ever make it this far? So let's jump right in. And I'm going to pause here. And for those who are here, are there any questions? No? Okay. Well, we'll come back to that. So there's still an open question here, and I'll get to that when I find time to just try it. Last week's highlights. Last time we had an issue with that Auth0 authentication. To my knowledge, that was resolved, um, and you would notice that there is an issue, that you have an issue if you either try, let's say you try to download something from our website and that requires you to authenticate, to register, and then authenticate to log in, or if you would like to post on the forum, you have to be authenticated as well. Or as we will see later, if you want to log into HDF Lab, all those three sites use the same underlying authentication mechanism. So if any of those three gives you trouble with respect to authentication, please let us know. But to the best of my knowledge, those issues were resolved, and I can report that it works for me. Just a reminder, the Vault tutorial was postponed. It will take place now February 25th, and you can still register. We had a Hermes 030 beta release. It's available on GitHub. I think the most notable change for anyone interested in this is we received a publisher subscriber API contribution from Jaime up at IIT at Illinois Tech, and we've integrated that into the 0.03 beta release, and it's there. And there is a page, I linked it here, there's a page on the wiki on GitHub where you can read more about it, what APIs it supports and so forth. And that's all good. And again, there will be the next 0.40 release will be there at the end of February. So again, we are trying to maintain that monthly cadence. In other news, there was an interesting blog post that was just published. Unfortunately, it was just published probably moments after I prepared these notes. But there is a very interesting blog post that we just published, and I want to alert you to that. It's called Biosimulations, a platform for sharing and reusing biological simulations. And after this meeting, I will update the notes and put the link in here. But I was provided with this link, and I'll just make it a little bigger, but we're not going to spend much time here. So the blog post is online, and it talks about HDF5 and HSDS and Vega. And it's a very interesting blog post. And yeah, I encourage you to go there and check it out. And again, yeah, I'll update the link in the notes right after this meeting. Now, I'm going to pause here and ask, are there any other questions at the moment?
No questions, Gerd.
Okay, thanks. Forum, I'm unhappy to report that there wasn't really, I mean, there were some questions on the forum. People had installation issues and so forth. And then a few other issues sort of crept up where someone was reporting they had issues, or they were seeing inconsistent performance results when using H5 repack and so forth. But this is all very early in the discussion. Somebody seemed to have trouble with a data set that seemed corrupted. And in some cases, I replied to them, but I haven't really gotten any feedback yet. So it's kind of, it would be premature to report anything in here. But the good news is there's no shortage of other material to cover. And I would like to, if we have time, cover actually three things here today under tips and tricks. Number one, and this is something that I ran into personally, and I think that's why it might be worthwhile. Maybe when I have a problem, maybe it's just me, but then there might be other people out there having the same issue. So I don't have to make this up. This happened to me just recently, and I would like to report on this. Number two, I would also like to draw people's attention to an environment that we provide for our users where they can just, so to speak, kick the tires or try things out with HDF5 and HSDS. It's accessible from just the browser. You don't need to install any software whatsoever, and it's just a very nice environment, I think, to get started with HDF5, or even if you are comfortable with HDF5 already, just to try something in an environment where everything is kind of installed already for you. And you can use it if you want to give a presentation to colleagues, friends, then this might be a good starting point also. And then finally, if we get to this, I want to show you something, a very nice visualization tool that is browser-based, developed by ESRF, a European synchrotron, that I think we will see more of in the future. But yeah, let's do one at a time. Okay, the first one is really, I believe among Linux distributions, two very popular choices are Debian and Ubuntu. And the other day, I run Debian on some of the machines with which I work. And I would admit that I don't use HDFView very frequently, but then when users ask questions about HDFView and so forth, I just want to go back and not verify or sort of confirm for myself what the issue may look like that people are reporting. So given that I'm using Debian, I wanted to find out, well, do we actually provide binaries for those, or where do they come from? And if you use, let's say, Debian, there is a standard mechanism. There is a tool called apt, and most packages you just install with apt install and then the package name or apt-get. And so I thought, well, I could just do an apt install HDFView. And to my surprise, Debian came back and said, well, there is no such package. Okay, I said, well, then where is it? Where can I find it? And what I do is I went to our downloads page, HDFView, and then I said, well, surely there must be a binary for Debian somewhere. And so here's the current release, and here are our pre-built binaries. And so I'm going down the list. There is CentOS, there's macOS, there's OS 10, Windows 10, and then there is an app versions of the installers and the user's guide. And so there's no Debian here, Debian or Ubuntu. And I said, okay, what can I do? And the first thing I tried, which I don't recommend, is, okay, if you take, for example, the CentOS installer, you can just uncompress it, untar it, and it contains an RPM, which is sort of in the Red Hat CentOS sort of line of Linux distributions, the standard package manager. And if you take that RPM on Debian, for example, there is a converter called Alien, and you could use Alien, for example, to convert the RPM to a .deb to a Debian archive. And I actually tried that, and indeed it works. However, when you then take that Debian installer that you've obtained this way with Alien, you get an installation of HDFView in which the permissions are actually wrong. So out of the box, you could run HDFView as root, which is not what I would recommend. But okay, it works. But then if you want to run it without super user privileges, it doesn't work. And okay, you can go in there and fiddle around with the permissions and so forth. But at that point, most people probably have given up, and I would perfectly understand that. And I would just say there should be an easier way. So I asked my colleagues, well, don't we provide installers for Debian and Ubuntu? And they said yes. Now I asked them, well, where are they? And so they pointed me in the right direction. But again, without that information, I don't know how, in double quotes, ordinary users would ever figure this out. So let me show you. If you come here, this is sort of the standard download page for pre-built binaries for HDFView. If you go to the bottom of this page, there is this looking for a specific release here, support portal. So if you click on that, and then here, latest software, and then there is this little table here. I apologize for the font size, but since we don't spend much time here, there isn't really that much relevant information. Okay, I'm looking for a specific release. Let's take HDFView 3.1.3, and that almost feels like deja vu, because we are getting then to this table, which almost looks like a repeat of what we see earlier. HDFView 3.1.3, and we have CentOS, we have macOS, and so, but no Debian on the Ubuntu. But before giving up, there is this link here, all ready to use pre-built binaries. And so if I click on that, now we are talking, we are getting somewhere. So it takes me to this directory on an FTP server, and lo and behold, we have actually pre-built binaries, actually two, depending on which LTS, long-term support version of Ubuntu you are using. There's a 2004 and a 2010, and they will just be what you might be looking for. So if you download one of these, and that's why I'm describing, so I'm not going to spend any more time here. But again, it took me, what, 4 clicks to get here. I think that's way too much, and who knows how many people actually ever figured this out. So the current version, and I put the links here in the show notes, so you can just download one, and I tried the 2004 one. I'm running Debian 10 though, so both should actually work on Debian 10. You unpack it with tar-zxvf, and then that basically extracts it, and you will find 2 files. There's going to be a README and then a .deb file. And I apologize, I forgot that dot here. So it's HDFView, then there's some kind of version number underscore, in my case, AMD64.deb. And then you just use dpackage, which is the command under Debian, for example, to install this. You install it, and that will create the installation directories with the right permissions and everything. Things are going to be in /opt/HDFView, and then there are 3 subdirectories: bin, lib, and share. And then in bin, as you would expect, you can launch HDFView with /opt/HDFView/bin HDFView. Notice the sort of the capitalization here of HDFV. And then, of course, yeah, you can add this to your path as needed if you don't want to type this all the time. Probably after 2 weeks, you will have forgotten where this thing is. So I recommend to maybe add this to your path. Now, the obvious question is, does this need to be this hard? I don't think so. So I promise you we will do something about this. But again, it's just, I didn't make up this story. It cost me probably half an hour in total to figure this out. And that's not good. So apologies, and we'll do better. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, good. Then we will just press on here. HDF Lab. And this is something that's been around for quite some time. Sort of the head behind this is my colleague, John Reedy, who has really, I think, developed this to a pretty high standard. And it's sort of, I think, one of these things that is frequently overlooked, and that's why I thought it is perfect material for an event like today's clinic. And if we keep talking more about it, maybe more people will pick up on it. it's what I would call, if I had to describe it in one short phrase, I would call it One Stop HDF5. That's what that is. And well, why is that? Um, well, number one, in fact, let me actually go there. So if you go there, you will see this familiar Jupyter Lab environment. So it will, once you've authenticated, since I was authenticated already, it just skipped that for me. So there was probably a cookie here on my browser. And then it will sort of create this, call it workspace for you. So if you're familiar with Jupyter Lab, that is what the Jupyter Lab API looks like. And you will have certain predefined content folders, examples most prominently. And then you have choices where you can just create a plain terminal if that's what you like, or launch an editor for text or Markdown. And then you, from the console, you can run Python or Julia or R. And or if you want to go right into Jupyter notebooks, you can do that with a Python 3 kernel, a Julia kernel, or an R kernel. Now, before we play with that a little bit, when you do this, all you need really is this authentication, and this is the same authentication that you use, for example, to download binaries for HDF5 or HDFView, or the same credentials that you use when you post on a forum or something like that. And so that same authentication works with HDF Lab, and I would encourage you to just try it. Now, what you're getting is you will have a home directory with about, I believe it's 10 gigabytes of free storage. And that storage is actually, that storage is, let me try to go over here. That storage is yours. So let me just launch a terminal here, for example, and I might have to bump up that font size. So if I do a disk-free dash H, you see I've used a little bit of that 9.8. I'm down to 9.8 gigabytes, but if you don't have anything here, it's about 10 gigabytes. And it's there. It's there in the sense that I think we have a service level agreement that says we don't recommend that you put critical to you, to your research or to your projects data here and hope that they are there. But under normal circumstances, when you shut down your browser, when you close that tab and you come back later, that data should be still there. And again, I don't believe we make any guarantees that if you come back in 5 years, then that's going to be the case the same way. But yeah, so just use common sense. And but again, it's 10 gigabytes there for you to try. And what you're getting is HSDS. So this this environment can talk to an HSDS installation. So rather than installing HSDS yourself, you can just come here and run with an existing HSDS installation. H5Pi is installed, and since you have 10 gigabytes of free space, just a regular sort of POSIX file system, you can certainly run H5Pi scripts and so forth. And with that H5Pi installation, of course, if you want a C program, you can do the same thing. So in that terminal here, for example, if I type H5CC, it's all here. So if I had a C program or a C++ program, I could just compile that and run that. And it's the same H5CC that you get when you install HDF5 from source or from your favorite package manager. And then you can, what I would recommend doing is look at some of these examples. And we have, for example, finance examples. These are sort of NASA type data. So I think some of them are climate data. Then we have NREL. I think those are that's a large wind speed data set. And then If you are completely new to HDF5, I would recommend to go to the HDF5 tutorial here. So I would recommend doing two things. Number one is watch the HDF5 videos on our YouTube channel to the extent that you are sort of interested and that you are learning, or go through these introductory Jupyter notebooks. Let me just launch one here. So this is the introduction. This is, oh, all right. So this is an introduction actually to HSDS. So here's an introduction to the REST API. So what you could do is take the YouTube videos the YouTube videos, put them on one screen or to one side, and then watch the YouTube video on the other half of the screen or another screen, and then try to actually run the examples that you see in the videos. Just type them into a Jupyter notebook in this environment, and then just run them and confirm to yourself that that's indeed how these things work in practice. So you can just step through this, and it teaches you what you can do with HSDS and so forth. And there's also tool support available. You can download, for example, there's a tool called HSLoad, so you can upload your own HDF5 files into this environment. If the file is relatively small, you can just upload it using a browser upload. But if it's a bigger file, John provides a tool called HSLoad, and then you can actually upload your file. Again, you have 10 gigabytes here. If your file is bigger than 10 gigabytes, I think that's not going to work. But if it's just 2 gigabytes or something like that, then yeah, you can certainly load it with HSLoad. And then yeah, you can look around and work with this. So this is really, I think, a fantastic environment. By the way, there are also several Jupyter plugins available for all kinds of different purposes, and then you can search for them. Some of them are pre-installed. Some of them you may install as you need them in your project. And so it's a very nice self-contained environment. All you need is a web browser, log in, and then start working in this environment. So if you if you want to give a demonstration, I mean, all these examples are here for you to use. And if you want to give someone else a quick introduction to HDF5, a very hands-on introduction with HSDS, then it's here. There is no reason to reinvent this unless you want to put emphasis on a very specific topic. Which is fine, but this is a good starting point, and then you can customize. This is all editable. This is not read-only. You can edit these, rename these, work with them whichever way you see fit. Okay, so that's HDF Lab. Any questions there?
No questions there, Gerd.
Okay, thanks. Which brings me to our final topic, H5 Web. So you might say, okay, this HDF Lab thing that I just showed you, that's all great. But when I'm running on my local desktop, I use HDFView to just sort of look at the HDF5 file. Yes, I know there are command line tools. And by the way, there are command line tools in this environment. So for example, there's a tool called HSInfo that tells me something about HSDS. And then there is HSLS. So for many of the H5 something HDF5 commands, there is an HS, same command, counterpart. But then you might say, oh, so what if I want something more graphical or more visual? And that's where a tool comes in that is called H5 Web. And I believe I forgot already what I linked here. I might have linked oh no, that's something else. I think this is H5 Web. Here's actually a demo that is hosted by the developers of H5 Web. who are members of the synchrotron light source community, and in Grenoble, France. And they developed this. It's based on, there is a JavaScript-based UI framework called React. And in React, they created this, call it, browser-based version of HDFView. So what you are seeing here is we are looking at an HDF5 file called water_224.h5. I think that the reality is this is actually an HSDS endpoint. So it is HDF5. It's not a file that's stored in a POSIX file system, but rather an HDF5 logical file, or HDF5 domain, I think John calls it sometimes, that is hosted on an HSDS service endpoint, maybe at ESRF somewhere, or somewhere in the cloud. But you see now I can do the same. I have sort of this tree view control that you're familiar with from HDFView. And then, of course, the developers in the sort of synchrotron light source community, as in many other application communities, there are certain standards that people use. And how do I make this thing disappear? I don't know. Anyway, make it full screen. Very good. There are profiles, as we call them, or certain standards, meaning the structure of data sets and decoration with attributes. And in the light source community, this is the so-called nexus format, or NX. So whenever you see this little NX icon here, I apologize, the font may be too small, but it's NX. Then that means, this is something that is governed by the NX standard and by the Nexus standard. And then you can, if you are a light source person, I'm just trying to find something useful here. So this is how some of this data ring current. I don't know what that means. I think they are timestamps. Okay, they are monotonic, and that's great. But so you can do these plots here, and you can do multi-dimensional things where you then potentially have to select 2 dimensions that you want to render on the screen. But then I think, they also support images like this. So there's something here called core map. I guess that's synthetic data. This is not something results from a particular experiment. This is just here for illustration purposes. But long story short, you have all these controls here over how to populate some of these dimensions. And then you have controls here where you can control the color map, for example. Right, you can change the entire color map, choose the different, I guess these are interpolations, or no, you can do scaling, so you can do logarithmic scaling or something like that. And so lots of controls here. And this is a very interesting project. And I think I just showed you HDF Lab. And our goal is to actually integrate H5 Web with HDF Lab. So I think in a few weeks or months, don't hold me to it, I hope when you go to HDF Lab, right now, if I go back here to the top, for example, this is a capability that the H5 Web developers have already created, is that next time you come here, I have, for example, 2 HDF5 files here that when I double click this right now, it will just tell me, okay, this is not UTF-8. So the viewer somehow, which is by default the text viewer, will just try to render this as a text file, which of course is not very meaningful here. Let's put it this way. But we want to make sure that this icon, similar to this Jupyter Notebook icon here, that you see something like an HDF5 icon. And again, this is a capability that the H5 Web developers have already created. So it's for us really to integrate this environment with H5 H5 Web, so that in the future I can just double click on that, and that would then automatically open an environment like this where I can go in and inspect the content and then play with different ways of visualizing that data. So that's where this is going. And yeah, check it out. I put the links to ESRF, to React, to the GitHub repos in here. And yeah, so I think that's it for today. And not so much about the forum, but I think practical things, hidden gems like HDF Lab, and maybe a little look toward the future where, yeah, this is something we definitely want to use more and more, especially with people using sort of web-based environments and web-based frameworks who say, I don't really want to install anything locally, or I don't really have a local host that is powerful enough to either host that data or render the data. But yeah, there are some great web-based developments out there like H5 Web. Okay, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are.
Okay, thanks, Gerd.
Thank you. Bye.